everyone, my name is Natalia and this is my YouTube channel Sigil the Explorer. Today I'm going to make another reaction video, and that will be the video from Geography Now about Brazil. So I thought that I covered some countries from Europe, I covered two countries, Indonesia and India, from Asia, and I thought that it was time to move to another part of the world, well, to the Americas. And I decided to start with Brazil. So Brazil is the fifth largest country by land area. When I think about Brazil, the first things that come to my mind are the carnival, the statue of Jesus Christ in Rio de Janeiro, and Brazilian soap operas. So Brazil, I learned about Brazil during my childhood through Brazilian soap operas, which were broadcast, as far as I remember, since my childhood through my teenage years. Yeah, I watched them. And they were shown every weekday, I think even Fridays. So at 6 or 7 p.m. So that people who work 9 to 5 hours already came back to home and were able to watch them. So I also watched them usually together with my mother, who came back from work by that time. Sometimes we were joined by my father, but he was more for the company, not for the actual plot of the soap operas. So I even remember some of the soap operas. So the last one that I watched was The Clone, and before that, I think there were Family Ties and also Everything for Love. I think it's the English version. And I also remember some actresses. So one of them was Regina Duarte, and I think, and why I remember the actresses is because they starred in almost every soap opera that I watched. So Regina Duarte was she was in the Everything for Love and some of the earliest ones. So she's a little bit older. In the latest two, in Family Ties and The Clone, I remember two actresses. One was Vera Fischer, and another was Giovanna Antonelli. You see, I remember even that because, so for example, in The Clone, I don't know, there were 200 episodes, even more. And of course, there were, when the cast is presented, of course, it is translated into Russian, so that's why they stuck in my memory. So yeah, I am familiar with Brazilian culture, of course, only through the soap operas. Of course, I haven't been to Brazil, although I would really love to go there someday. So yeah, besides that, I'm not even sure what I know about Brazil. But let's see, maybe something jumps when I watch the video, maybe not. But I hope to learn some or a lot of information about Brazil today. So let's dive in.
Hey Geography peeps, so Brazil is one of the largest countries in the world. Obviously, I won't be able to cover everything within about 10 minutes. I'll try to do my best, but in the meantime, soccer, monkeys, Amazon, Ronaldo and samba songs, capoeira, anacondas, carnival, and attractive people that kind of have like tan skin. Oh, come on guys, you knew that was coming.
Okay.
It's time to learn geography.
That was pretty much that I know about Brazil. So carnival, yeah, football, I didn't mention that, but of course. I am not interested in really much in football, but even I know some prominent football players like Ronaldinho or Ronaldo or Pelé, of course. He was one of the greatest ones. Anyway, I almost said Maradona, but Maradona was Argentinian.
Hey everybody, I'm your host Barbie, I guess that's a thing now, and after weeks of anticipation, we finally finished the Brazil video, and you know how we start these things, let's dissect the flag.
So this is one of the, oh, by the way, here we have the flag. So this is one of the earliest videos, so it's letter B, so yeah, the video is not long, it's 12 minutes as I see now. So in the earliest versions, they actually named the flag. Okay, let's see.
The flag of Brazil has a green field with a yellow rhombus in the middle and a blue disc in the center with 27 stars scattered throughout the disc and the country's motto depicted on a white band sprawled across the blue disc. Some people might tell you that the green represents forests and yellow represents gold, but yeah, that's not really true. The green and yellow are actually inspired from the former imperial flag of Brazil, which was derived from two royal households, the green representing the House of Braganza for King Dom Pedro I, and the yellow for the House of Habsburg that his wife Maria Leopoldina came from. The blue disc and the stars are what make up the most fun part of this flag. Each star represents one of the 27 states of Brazil. Furthermore, they are all separated into 9 different constellations that you can typically see in the southern hemisphere. Straddling across the blue disc is a banner with the country's motto, Ordem e Progresso, which means order and progress. A flag with stars representing each state in the country. Ah, Brazil, I think there's some people that can gel well with that.
By the way, what does this one star above the line means? I don't know. If you know, please let me know if it matters at all.
Which means order and progress. A flag with stars representing each state in the country. Ah, Brazil, I think there's some people that can gel well with that. Now here's where things get a little fun, because each section of Brazil kind of has its own little story. But first, Brazil is the largest country in the South American continent. If you grew up in Latin America, you would have been told that both South and North America are together one continent, but for pragmatic definitional reasons, we're just going to treat South America as a separate entity, as its own continent. Brazil's domain stretches all the way from the Atlantic coast and deep into the interior of the continent. Brazil is bordered by every single South American country except for Ecuador and Chile. You could also technically say that Brazil borders France. Why? Because of this little guy. French Guiana. That's right, this is not a country, but rather an overseas territory of France. It's okay, raise your hand if you just learned that. You're learning. The country's capital is the aptly named Brasilia, located slightly inland in the central west region of Brazil, and actually administers itself in its own federal district, much like Washington, D.C. Brasilia was actually built in 1960 as they were switching from the old capital, Rio de Janeiro. That's right, it's pronounced Rio de Janeiro, not Rio de Janeiro. Get it right, we're not in Mexico, this is Portuguese, not Spanish. This was done in an attempt to provide a more regional.
Then I don't pronounce the city's name correctly then. In Russian, it's called Rio de Janeiro, so it's de. Okay.
Neutrality for the rest of the states in Brazil by centralizing the capital. Brazil is divided into 27 federative units, 26 of which are states and 1 federal district, which is where the capital resides. Each state and region of Brazil has their own unique flavor that they bring to the table, and we'll discuss more about that in the demographics, but essentially it kind of goes like this. We grow food. We got all the money. We are so black. We are so white. Stop cutting our trees. In terms of disputes, Brazil has 2 disputed areas with Bolivia on the Mamoré River and 2 disputed areas with Uruguay on the Uruguay River and in the Masoyero Rivera that nobody cares about. Funny backstory, Uruguay actually used to be part of Brazil, known as the Cisplatina province, yada yada yada. There was a war, they gained their independence. Brazil has a ton of islands off their coast, but the furthest reaches of the Brazilian domain would have to be the 4 island and archipelago chains in the Atlantic: Fernando de Noronha, the Rocas Atoll, the St. Peter and St. Paul Rocks, which is a non-permanent residence science lab station, and Trindade and Martin Vaz. Otherwise, the western mainland borders look kind of funny. If you look at the map, it kind of looks like Brazil has river Tourette syndrome, in which they have a lot of half rivers, but then they jump onto the next adjacent river, which is like a couple hundred kilometers away. It's like, I'll take part of the Rio Acre, but then, I'll cut through and make my way over to the Rio Purus. I'll take the Rio Santa Rosa, but then, I'll jump over to Rio Breu. This all had to do with centuries of disputes with the former empires, and today you have this massive piece of sovereign complexity. And that's just the borders. Wait till you see what's inside the borders.
By the way, just to mention that, so 4 minutes of the video passed, and they chose some very lively music to accompany their speech, and this is very hard to follow. I mean, I have hard time following what he says because music is makes me want to jump and dance, you know. Yeah, interesting. All their other videos that I watched didn't have either that loud music or that lively music. I'm not sure, but yeah, this is it's really hard to concentrate.
When you think of Brazil, everybody just kind of automatically defaults to one image, the Amazon. And yes, the Amazon is a very imperative factor to the nation's domain. However, there's a lot more to it in terms of landscape and terrain. First of all, about 60% of the entire Amazon rainforest is located in Brazil, mostly in the north region, and of course, no surprise, consists of the most heavily compact ecoregion on Earth. Out of all the 10 million species of animals and insects known to human beings, about half of them call the Amazon rainforest home. Many of the species that have yet to be discovered are still lingering about in the deep, uncharted depths of the Amazon today. Now, we all know that there's a huge deforestation problem going on in Brazil in the Amazon to provide more agricultural land. However, even Brazil's own citizens are harshly criticizing the action. It's a little tricky though, because with Brazil's rapidly growing population, more resources are demanded of the people. So it's kind of like, we get it, it's bad, but I mean, what do you want us to do? Our country is growing and we need to provide you people with more stuff. Use alternative methods! Like what? We're working on it! Otherwise, outside of the Amazon, the rest of the country has a vast array of contrasting scenery almost equally as fascinating. Along the coast, you have the Mata Atlântica, or the Atlantic Forest, the Cerrado, or the tropical savannas in the center. This is also the area where most farms and ranches can be found. Also, keep in mind, Brazil is one of the top countries in meat production and exports. In the south, you have the Araucaria, or the pine evergreen forests. In the north, you have the small mountains, especially close to the border of Venezuela, in which you can find one of the most notable natural landmarks being the tri-point border between Venezuela, Guyana, and Brazil, Mount Roraima, even though Brazil only owns about 5% of the mountain. But still, it counts! Roraima is one of the strangest looking flat-top plateau mountains with vertical cliffs almost perpendicular to the ground, earning it the label as one of the hardest mountains to climb. Fun side note, Mount Roraima was one of the areas that inspired the scenery for the Pixar movie Up, which is a great movie. By the way, go ahead, watch it. And with that said, Pixar and Disney, you can't sue me for copyright infringement rights for using a clip of your movie in my corner box here, because in accordance with fair use limitation rights, I commented and gave a critique on your material. Just letting you know, you can't sue me. One of the most remarkably bizarre and unusual spots of the country, though, would have to be the famous flooded deserts of Lençóis Maranhenses. This place, located on the north coast of the Maranhão state, is almost alien-like, as there are virtually no places like it on Earth. Essentially, it's a sand dune desert with abundant lagoons speckled throughout the entire region. Although it gets a lot of rainfall yearly,
And it looks beautiful. All right, I will make a note of this place. Nice.
The area supports little vegetation and wildlife. Nonetheless, the area draws in thousands of tourists yearly, as it contains the almost paradoxical juxtaposition of elements in its scenery. It's not every day that you see
It's like snow. It looks like snow, but I guess the temperatures are not like in winter. Nice. Very good.
flooded desert. All right, let's talk about the Brazilian.
Flooded desert. That's true.
Biscoito, bolacha, biscoito, bolacha. Yeah, we'll explain what that means in a little bit. But first, now of course Brazil is incredibly diverse, but before we get into that little pie graph thingamajiglet that we always do here in the demographics section, I feel like it's very crucial to mention one important thing about Brazil's people. Now, everybody knows that one of the most dramatically unique traits of Brazil would have to be its people. When asked, what do you think a Brazilian looks like? The stereotype is somebody with a perfectly bronzed, toned body and with slight Germanic features. One reason why this stereotype has been perpetuated so extensively is because, in a strange way, it's kind of true. Over the course of a few hundred years since colonization, Brazil's population has actually virtually invented an entirely new race that never exactly existed before, and it makes up nearly half of the entire population. I'm talking about the Pardo people. Now, although the definition is vague and up for relative dispute, essentially this is the easiest way I can describe it. Pardo people are kind of like people that are either too white to be black or too black to be white, and there's probably a little bit of Amerindian in there. That being said, now let's jump into the pie graph. Brazil has about 202 million people, making it the fifth most populous country in the world, right behind Indonesia. About 47% of the people identify as white, about 43% identify as pardo, about 8% are black, 1.5 Asian, and a very small portion, about 0.5% of the population, are Amerindian. Speaking of Asians, at about 1.5 million strong, Brazil is actually the country with the largest Japanese population outside of Japan. About 70% of whom live in the city of Sao Paulo. Asians have actually historically been migrating to Brazil for centuries. In terms of socio-regional distinctions, Brazil has quite the buffet of ethnic enclaves. For one, you can typically find more black people in the north, and especially in the Bahia state, where they make up over half of the entire population. This is also the area where you can disputably find some of the best capoeira masters in the world, as it is believed to have originated in this area. In the south, and more specifically in the Rio Grande do Sul state, you have one of the largest white populations in the entire country, with immigrants coming from places like Germany, Italy, and the Netherlands. In fact, many of these places have remained relatively untouched by the rest of Brazil, and many of the communities still retain the mother language of the country the members of the community came from. Oh, and there's a joke in Brazil that nobody has met anybody from the state of Acre. It's so far and secluded that you may as well just call it North Bolivia. It's mine, Brazil! Nope, too bad, we won it in the war, it's still ours, deal with it. And of course you have the various native tribal groups. There are about 240 tribes that a little over 900,000 people claim to be a part of ethnically. The government has recognized 690 territories and reservations for these various people groups that make up about 13% of the entire country's landmass, nearly all of it localized in the Amazon rainforest. Brazil's governmental agency for tribal peoples has a list of about 80 uncontacted tribal groups that deliberately choose to remain disconnected from the rest of the world. The governmental agency speculates that there are still many unnamed, undiscovered tribes currently living in the vast, uncharted forests of the Amazon. Culture-wise, it really depends on where you are in Brazil, but everybody knows that Brazil kind of has a very vibrant way that they carry themselves out to the rest of the world. The center of culture, disputably, being Rio de Janeiro, and the economic capital being Sao Paulo. Most of the population lives within driving distance of the coasts, so there is, in a sense, a prevalent beach culture, especially for the people on the east side of the country. Not everybody in Brazil loves soccer. In fact, many places prefer basketball, and skateboarding has actually been a huge thing that's been exploding over the past few years. And no, not everybody has been to a carnival. Oh, and another thing, there's currently a war going on in Brazil. It's been very brutal, it's been going on for decades, and it's getting quite intense right now. I'm talking about the cookie war. In Brazil, people will ridicule you if you pronounce the word for cookie differently from them, and especially it's a whole Rio versus Sao Paulo thing. People in Sao Paulo will call it bolacha, and the people in Rio will call it biscoito. This conflict has led to the violence and deaths, leading in the victimization of people caught in the crossfire, and you almost fell for it, didn't you? Now let's talk about their relationships.
Alright, so he didn't mention anything at all about the language and the languages spoken in Brazil, so here I must stop and add information here. So he mentioned that the overall population is more than 200 million people. So according to 2020 World Factbook source, there were 211 million people living in Brazil. So the number of established languages listed for Brazil is 238. Of these, 217 are living and 21 are extinct, unfortunately. Of the living languages, 200 are indigenous. Actually, some other sources say that there are more than 200 indigenous languages, and 17 are non-indigenous. Yeah, and as I said, the numbers can be a little different if you look into the different sources. So, Portuguese is an official language of Brazil, and they speak a Brazilian Portuguese, so this is a version of Portuguese. And as far as I know, and I asked some Brazilians, by the way, how well they would understand Portuguese from Portugal, and they say that it's okay. It's understandable. They are mutually intelligible, although there can be some difference in pronunciation. Of course, some words can be different, but a Portuguese speaking person from Portugal and from Brazil, they would understand each other. So, in Brazil, 201 million people speak Portuguese as their first language, according to the source dated 2020. And there are 10.2 million people speaking Portuguese as their second language. By the way, in São Paulo, there is the Museum of a Portuguese Language. This is one of a kind museum. So there are museums around the world dedicated to languages or to words. For example, there is one in Toronto in Canada, and this museum is dedicated to the indigenous languages of Canada. Or there is one, by the way, opened not very long time ago in Washington, D.C., so in the U.S. It's called Planet Word. So, and this museum is dedicated to languages in general, to the words. But this museum, which is located in Brazil, in São Paulo, this is a museum dedicated to just one language, to Portuguese. So it is housed in a train station in São Paulo. And the idea when creating this museum was that a lot of people arriving in from abroad, arriving in São Paulo, go through this train station. So the idea was that all the non-Portuguese people arriving in São Paulo through a port, so they go through this train station, and they would have their first encounter with the language there. But also, it was built. The museum was built not only for tourists, but also for people living in São Paulo, just to tell people about the language, its origin, its features. So yeah, I would definitely love to go there, as I'm a language nerd, and I mentioned that several times already. That will be one of the first places I would go in Brazil. And when, you see, I'm saying when, not if, when I go there, I would definitely visit the museum. Now, coming back to languages. So, English. All in all, there are 10.9 million users of English in Brazil. 121,000 people speak English as their first language. This is based on nationality, so meaning that someone where English is used as their first language lives in Brazil. And 10.8 million Brazilians speak English as their second language. Spanish is quite widespread in Brazil. There are in total 6.3 million people speaking Spanish. Of these, 742,000 speak Spanish as their first language. Again, this is based on nationality. And 5.6 million Brazilians speak Spanish as their second language. So I mentioned already that there are indigenous languages in Brazil and also non-indigenous languages. Of the non-indigenous, by the way, English and Spanish are also non-indigenous languages. What else? So what other languages are spoken in Brazil? Among those are German, Dutch, Polish, Ukrainian, and of course others. And the number of speakers ranges from about 10,000 speakers to about 40,000 speakers. These are rough numbers. Another non-indigenous language, which has an interesting story, is called Hunsrück or Hunsrückisch. So there are 3 million users of this language in Brazil, and it is spoken in the area called Rio Grande do Sul. I think that's the name of this region, and it is located in the south of Brazil. So, and this region was already mentioned by the host there, and he showed that this region has the largest population of white people. He said that. So, and he also mentioned that happened because there were a lot of people coming from Germany, from other countries as well, but from Germany, maybe the largest population, the largest number of people came from Germany. I'm not sure. But coming back to the language, so Hunsrück, it derived primarily from the Hunsrückisch dialect of West Central German. And Hunsrückisch is a German dialect spoken in the Hunsrück region of Germany. This region was, or maybe not was, has been an exporter of immigrants to Brazil and other countries. So when they came to Brazil, they obviously they spoke their language, the Hunsrückisch dialect of German, and it spread. So this Hunsrückisch variant of German became like a means of communication between different groups of immigrants that came to Brazil. Why it happened? I mean, why not standard German? Why not other language? So there are two opinions. So first, that the largest, what I mentioned, that the largest number of people came from that region, and that's why. So the largest number of people was speaking this dialect, this Hunsrückisch variant of standard German, and that's why it became a means of communication for others as well. The second opinion is that Hunsrückisch dialect is actually quite close to, no, it's not quite close to the standard German. It just has features that unifies other dialects of German. So it's like a mixture of dialects. I actually haven't heard. It's just the information that I read about this. So if it is something that I am wrong about, just let me know. But this is what I read. So, and it has been a means of communication. I mean, the Hunsrückisch dialect, it has been the means of communication for more than 200 years between these people. And of course, Portuguese influenced it. The Portuguese that was spoken in Brazil influenced it also. And now it's not considered a dialect. It is considered a language. So the Hunsrück, by the way, if I'm pronouncing it incorrectly, also I'm sorry. If you know how to pronounce it correctly, please let me know in the comments. So Hunsrück, the Hunsrück language now is a language, not a dialect. I mean, the one that is spoken in Brazil, not the one that is spoken in Germany. All right, so this is a story about Hunsrück. Now let's move on to the indigenous languages. So the host there also mentioned that there are a lot of ethnic groups in Brazil, and almost all of them speak their own language. Maybe not almost. All of them speak their own language. As I mentioned, there are 200 or maybe even more than 200 indigenous languages. Some of them are still living, some of them are unfortunately extinct. The number of users is ranged from a few to a few thousand users. So, for example, there is one language which is called Uru A Wow Wow or Uru Oi Wow Wow. Honestly, here I'm a little bit lost about the pronunciation. The other name of this language is Kagwahiva, which is a little bit easier to pronounce. And there are only 87 users of this language. The source, by the way, is a little bit old. It's dated 2006. So actually, the numbers now can be different. So it's almost, well, not almost, but soon it will be 20 years to this source. And of course, in 20 years, a lot of things can happen. Another language, which is indigenous, is called Tucano. And there are 4.6 thousand people speaking this language in Brazil. Again, the source is dated 2006. So again, this is quite an old source and the numbers can be different. Yeah. By the way, I named only 2 indigenous languages just as an example. There are more than 200. So as with India and Indonesia, which I made a reaction video a few days ago, actually not a few days, maybe a few weeks ago already. So as in the case of those countries, and also Russia has a lot of languages. When you're speaking about languages in a country that has more than 100, actually more than 50 already, it is so hard to pack all the information to talk about them. So these are just examples. I didn't plan to tell about all the languages in Brazil, but actually it will be an interesting story to tell. And the same interesting story will be if we talk about Indonesia, India, Russia, and all other countries. For me at least, I can talk about it for hours, but I won't. I will just stop here talking about languages in Brazil and move on to the video. So let's watch it till the end.
Now, Brazil kind of gets along with everyone, but he's kind of like that friend that ventures off and does whatever he wants while you wait in the hallway until he comes back from doing whatever he's doing. First off, pretty much all of their neighbor nations get along with them, although Argentina has a huge competitive hatred for Brazil when it comes to soccer. But all of that aside, they have good relations and trade.
By the way, football. Yeah, I know that in the US, they call it soccer. The rest of the world call it football.
Policies. Then, just like mentioned before in the Angola video, they get along with other nations of the former Portuguese Empire like Angola, Mozambique, São Tomé and Príncipe, Cabo Verde, and so on. They even get along with Portugal and have no bitterness towards the former colonization. Now, when it comes to the US, for centuries they've been good friends and have a deep history of trade and alliances. However, recently Brazil has been kind of diddle-doddling off, making friends with other people that kind of give the US the old shifty eye. Then we have Venezuela and Cuba. Brazil has sided with the Venezuelan government more in the past few decades and has built a $1.5 billion port in Cuba. Then we have Iran. Recently, Brazil has been testing the waters on attempting to build ties with them, although they haven't really improved much recently. Nonetheless, Brazil is quite the popular guy. Not many people dislike Brazil, except for maybe the Brazilians in Brazil that may complain about their own country's administrative affairs, but that's a lesson you'll have to learn by talking to an actual Brazilian person, not me. Plus, we're almost out of time. In conclusion, Brazil is so much more than just the Amazon and soccer, and we didn't even scratch the surface of Brazil in this video. And to find out more, I recommend just talk to a Brazilian. Just remember which side of the cookie you're on. Stay tuned, Brunei is coming up next.
So that was it about Brazil. Again, so as far as I already know, that their earlier videos were quite short, although of course they contain quite a lot of information still. Let it be not that much information as they give in their videos now. So nothing was told about their culture, only about, well, the cookies. Actually, that was the first time I learned about this. I need to go and check. I also have some friends from Brazil. Maybe I will ask them how serious it is. That's an interesting topic. And yeah, so they didn't mention any people, any foods from Brazil. I guess I will have to learn it by myself, or I will ask my friends whom I know, who are Brazilians. But anyway, I learned something about Brazil already good. Yeah, I feel again, like in the episodes of Germany, that I didn't add much. Maybe I would need to go to Brazil to add more information. And as I said, when I go there, I will learn something at least. Anyway, so that is it about Brazil. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Please let me know in the comments what you think, and see you soon in my next reaction video. Bye!